All right, hello and welcome everybody to the Microsoft 365 and Teams Power User Group for the month of September. We have been working on executing these once a month, and today we're going to be talking about Microsoft, which is built into SharePoint Lists. So there's going to be some really cool enhancements that are coming on this, and we wanted to start by building a foundation because there's some great capabilities that lists are going to bring to the table. So we've got Jeff Woods here, who's one of our senior engineers and our service manager in our Colorado branch. He's actually been facilitating Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now sessions for a couple years now. So Jeff's been heavily involved in this in our organization and is definitely one of the gurus across the Microsoft 365 suite. So we're excited to have him present. A couple housekeeping items. We'll do our best to try and mute folks if you aren't muted, but when you come in, please go ahead and mute. We'll try and keep that going. But we do want to keep it so that people can unmute as we get into questions and interjecting different capabilities. So thanks for keeping an eye on your mic. Ask questions. We've got Stephanie Kingsley, who will be also kind of staffing and looking at making sure the Q&A. So please go ahead and start throwing in questions to the Q&A throughout the presentation. And when we open it up for questions after the core content, by all means, we'd appreciate you using the raise your hand feature, as that will allow us to call on you and specifically unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and then interject your question in the dialogue. So I don't think we have any polls today, so you don't have to worry about that. But that was sometimes the things that we asked for as far as just giving us some feedback. So those are just some of the key housekeeping items. And again, for those of you who might not know, my name's Nathan Austin, and I'll be kind of participating with Jeff here and just kind of interjecting some thoughts as Jeff goes along. But for the most part, Jeff is going to be leading us today. So we always like to at least have 1 minute about MyTech, as I like to say, because this session's not about MyTech, but we always like to make sure people know who we are and what we do. We are a business and technology consulting organization that we work with small and medium businesses, and we define that as 15 to 500 technology users, if that makes sense. Over the last 20 years of being in business, we've learned a lot about what makes IT work. Not that we've found the only way to make IT work, it's just that we found a way that we've been able to have proven success with our clients, that we know it removes IT challenges and really enables our clients to be more dynamic and flexible and adaptable to the other challenges that we all inevitably face as businesses. Our goal is to make IT easy, just to make sure that that's the challenge we give our team. So if you ever feel that our team's not doing that for you, please let us know. But we know together with the proven IT strategy and having the right engagement with our clients, that we can help our clients can achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. So if you want to talk about that at some point, we'd love to have a conversation with you. Otherwise, enough about us. Let's dig into the session. So first and foremost, though, one of the reasons we always like to put a little context around the target of this session and the target communication of this session. We it's not that we've coined the phrase power user, but MyTech has actually built a unique permission structure inside of the Microsoft 365 suite that we have defined, or that we call power user. It is not a formalized Microsoft term or a permission set. Like, for instance, global admin is a permission that Microsoft provides. A team owner or a team member, those are specific team permission sets that Microsoft uses. But we basically realize, in working with our clients over the last few years, that each organization should have at least one, if not a couple, power users, or a few, where you're not necessarily the global admin, but you are the person at a business level that might help drive the adoption and the use of this technology into your organization. And we want to enable you and empower you to understand a little bit more about the back-end infrastructure and the core structure and the intent around how these solutions were designed, so that you can help your organization think through those things as you determine which solution is the best fit for you. Of course, we are here to help, and we'd happy to walk alongside you in that journey. However, we also understand that the more that we can empower and enable you to be autonomous and do this yourself, we hope that you can drive it faster and be more dynamic inside your organization as you iterate the use of these tools. So that's who we're targeting, and that's who we're talking to today. So thank you all for joining us as we go along. So now that we're digging into the agenda, Jeff, I will hand it off to you, as I'm excited about all the content you've put together and the demonstration that you've put together. So everyone, Jeff Woods, our service manager from Colorado.
Hey everybody, thanks Nate. All right, so our agenda today, we're going to do a quick recap of the previous session that Gerald did last month called Editing SharePoint. The reason I feel it's important to do so is that in some of the discussion and content that we're going to go into today, we'll actually build off of some of the stuff that Gerald talked about last month. We'll also move into what is Microsoft List. There's a lot changing this month, so it's really exciting about what Microsoft has decided to do with those lists. And we'll also discuss what's the difference between lists or SharePoint libraries or the ToDo app, because all of them seem similar in some aspects. So I definitely want to kind of go over what you can expect between the three of those. And then we'll also discuss some things to consider when building lists, and we'll finish up with a demonstration on how to build out a few different styles of lists. All right, so to recap Gerald's session previously, there are two different sites that you can build inside SharePoint. There are team sites and communication sites. Team sites can be more team building oriented type environments, whereas communication sites are more like read-only material. It's kind of like an actual website that you would go to. Lists can actually be used in both. However, it really depends on what you want to do with the list as to which site you want to consider using. We'll also go into site permissions here a little bit. If you remember from previous month, and I've got a slide here to actually show you what those permissions are. There's 4 different permissions that are available in SharePoint. And really, the lists actually inherit the permissions of the site that they are inside. So really, depending on what permissions you give users on that site will actually determine what permissions they have available for the list as well. And then page structure to SharePoint. So if you remember, a page is a place to store content. Sections divide up the page and allow for formatting, and web parts are the content modules that you can add to the page. Lists actually have a web part that you can use to add to a page, and we'll demo that in a little bit as well. All right, so here are those various permissions that you can choose for the site, which again, a list will inherit those from. I strongly recommend whiteboarding your sites and permission structure before building. It'll go a long way towards expanding in the future. This is also a process that we assist our clients with when planning to move to Microsoft 365. So if you have the ability to plan and whiteboard, set up your group, set up your content, your sites, your teams and such before building, it really helps removing those obstacles when expanding into the future. All right, and I also, before we jump into Microsoft Lists, I do want to talk briefly about licensing. Because lists are stored in SharePoint, we'll continue to look to the SharePoint Online row for which plans that will allow for Microsoft Lists. So if you have any of these licenses, this content will be available in your organization. All right, so what is a SharePoint, or what is a Microsoft SharePoint List? So it's an intuitive way to handle smart information tracking with collaboration and organization of workloads. One of the most powerful things that you can do with lists is you can use it for collaboration, which is why I mentioned in the previous slides about the 2 different sites you can build in SharePoint. While it works for both sites, its true power really becomes useful in the team sites, and it's collaboration that you can do with other individuals. Also, we're kind of in a bit of a transition period right now, as Microsoft's actually rolling out a standalone app this month. So we have some components available in this demo, but we don't have the standalone app just yet. I suspect we'll probably have a second part to this session once that app is available, because there is a lot that you can actually do in lists. Historically, lists have actually been in SharePoint for over 20 years, which is why I put SharePoint in parentheses. Some of you might have been using lists for many years, and some might be brand new to this. But with the rollout of the new standalone app, Microsoft's dropping the name of SharePoint from the title, and they're just going with Microsoft Lists. So I'll start to try to use Microsoft Lists as the official term for this moving forward. Now, despite it moving into just calling it Microsoft Lists, the content is actually still and will continue to actually live in SharePoint. And one of the great things when a piece of content is considered to become a standalone app is that Microsoft adds it to their roadmap, which means many new features and improvements will start to come out constantly. So now that Microsoft has decided that this is the next app that they're going to use, we're actually going to start to see a lot of really cool things get built into it and a lot of functionality. Like one thing Nate talked about, or Nate and I had a conversation about, is in Microsoft Project, and trying to connect those. I have a feeling, and I've read in their development, there's some talk about they're going to start to integrate the two. So I really do feel like you're going to really start to see lists take off and really become one of the focal points for Microsoft. All right, so some features and functionalities of the list. So here's a couple that are already available in its current version. So lists have the ability to have rules, just like Outlook. It's where you can provide some intelligence to the data you find in those lists. And again, in collaboration with teams, there are so much that you can do with sharing out with other individuals, sharing with your team, sharing with individuals outside of the organization as well, which really shows the power of what lists can become. It also allows for, there's many templates that are available. I think at the moment there's about 10, but I know that they're already building more. So it really helps that Microsoft has designed the structure already, so you don't have to necessarily build from scratch. And it also has automation. So you can use Power Apps and Power Automate for that to actually change the rows and send data places and do all sorts of fun stuff with the list as well. We're not going to go necessarily that deep into this content in this one, but again, I can really see a second session where we start to build, automate, and build intelligence in those lists. And I'll tell you, one of the features that I'm personally excited for that I didn't put on the list because it's not released just yet is the ability to have a calendar view. So if you take a list that has dates, you can actually have a calendar view that can be viewed and modified in Outlook as well. I suspect based on the Microsoft roadmap and where they're at right now, that actually will be a feature that's going to be released this month. So that's actually really exciting. All right, so what is a list or library, or what's the difference between the two? This was one of the questions I personally came up with, and I've heard from others in the community of, why don't I just use a document library? Why do I need a special list? So a document library in SharePoint, or a SharePoint library, it's a special list of stored documents, files, folders, etc. You can use lists to actually tie several document libraries together with other content. So a document library is a type of list, but a list is not a document library, if that makes sense. And where the lists are actually stored is stored in the metadata inside site contents. So you're able to kind of pull up the list there, and documents, they're stored in a little different area in SharePoint. We'll kind of show that in a little bit here. And then lists can also have attachments. So that's one unique thing about it that makes it almost seem like it's a document library as well. But unlike where you can pull up the storage documents and access them on their own, you have to use the list to pull up the attachment. And that's what's stored inside site contents. So what that really means is that if you delete your list, you'll actually delete those attachments as well. So you want to really consider that should you choose to build a document library or a list, and we'll go into that here in a little bit. But on the other side of it is, once you kind of learn what a list is, another question that we've had is, well, why don't we just use the ToDo app? The ToDo app has been around for quite a while. A lot of people have used it for grocery lists and everything else, basically list-based. But the ToDo app, despite being available for enterprise clients, it's really considered a consumer-based app. Microsoft's not really invested in building into it, expanding into it, trying to kind of grow that. And so its functionality is greatly limited. Lists, they've been around since they've been in SharePoint for years. They go way beyond the basics, and they add in a lot more customization and flexibility that really adds a lot of complex management. So.
Yeah, Jeff, and the only thing I might interject on that, back on the to-do versus list, is that what I've found, from a consumer versus enterprise, is that to-do is more targeted towards individual use. So like I as an individual love using my To-Do app on my mobile phone, and I also have it on my desktop, but it's really for me, as opposed to, even though you do have some capability to share, you can create like a to-do list and you can share that. I don't know, it's more really about an individual user use of that. So whereas a SharePoint list is definitely designed to be more for a team, company-wide, group of individuals, et cetera. So that's another way to think about why you might choose one versus the other as well.
Absolutely. Great point. All right. So a couple tips for success when you're determining what you want to build when you want to build a Microsoft list. So determine what type of list matches your need. Again, building these lists from scratch can take time. So take a look at Microsoft's templates that they have available. You might be able to rely on one of those templates and be able to save time formatting from scratch. Also, is the data in Excel? A lot of people, when they keep their lists historically, have been keeping them in Excel. You might be able to just import from Excel. That's a really, really powerful feature of lists, and it makes it much quicker than starting from scratch, essentially. And then, where do you want your list to be viewed? So once the app is available, you'll have that, but you also have it available in Teams and SharePoint as well. However, my point here is that if you build in Teams and lists, you won't automatically see it in the SharePoint page. So you'll want to consider using the list web part in case some of your workforce prefers to see the list there. And we'll actually go into how to add that into SharePoint as well. And then also consider the attachments and the supporting documents. Do you have lots of documents that will go into the list? Consider putting them in a document library and linking, or do you have one-off docs that can live in lists as well? So you might want to consider what's the content that you'll actually be storing in that list as well. All right, so with that, let's jump to the fun stuff. We're going to go right into the demo here. So I'm going to pull up. I already have a couple things built. And we're going to start in Teams. So I've built out this project team here, and I'm going to kind of use this as, as if we were part of the projects department. So to add a list in Teams, you're going to hit the plus. And as you can see, they've already put lists in here in the tabs, and that's the same icon that you'll see once you go to the waffle and actually see all the different apps. So you can choose list. I'm going to ask you to save that tab. And then you're going to get a couple different options here. You can add an existing list if you've built it elsewhere. So if you were already building in SharePoint or you built in Microsoft Lists, you can actually just link them here, or you can also create a new list. We're actually going to go to create a new list. And then as you can see, we've got the various templates here, and we've got a couple different options here as well. So these are the templates that I'm referring to that Microsoft is going to continue to add to as they go on. We're not going to open up any of these templates in this particular session, but I would recommend, encourage anybody to go in there and play with them and see if you've got one that works for you. What I have done is I've created an Excel spreadsheet, and so we're going to import from Excel. So once we go in here, as you can see, this is the documents area that you should recognize from the files tab up there. We're going to click upload file. I've got my master projects list as if I am a projects manager. And as you can see, it brings in everything in here. Now, one thing to note about this list is it doesn't bring in the entire spreadsheet right away. All it does is brings in the first few rows so you can actually see what the formatting will look like. And you have to have header information as well. So you do have to build tables into Excel in order for this to show up properly. But you can go through each one of these tables. You've got drop downs to actually choose what you want to do with it. And you can actually choose to not import if you so choose. So in this particular example, as you notice, you scroll down in order to get the scroll bar, but the top part stays. We can scroll through. All of these are single line text. But here's one of those features that I was mentioning I'm really excited for when they build in here, is date and time. So once the calendar view is available, when you have date and time and you have that properly set in your list, you'll actually be able to have a calendar that you can import into Outlook and use. So that's a really cool feature.
Jeff, I wonder, as a side note, one of the questions that I've gotten many times from folks is being able to have like a PTO calendar or a vacation calendar in SharePoint. And the problem has been historically that you can't share that. So I might post it to my calendar as like I'm on PTO, but I can't like post it to like a SharePoint calendar or something like that. Is that something that you think this will solve that problem?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, and we'll go into what manage access means, and you can actually customize who has access to that calendar, who can add to that calendar, who can delete from that calendar. So you can, if you so choose, you can have your own employees put in their PTO and it will add to that calendar. You know, everything that we're doing here in this projects team general area is available to anybody who's part of that projects team. So this is where the collaboration really starts to shine, where you can actually, you know, this isn't to myself individual, this is, you know, to everybody who has access to that. So absolutely, that's a good point. And I think that might even be one of the templates, or you have a template that would work for that as well. Question. All right, so continuing on with lining up all of these areas, this one is currency. We're going to throw that in there. And this one's actually percentages, and we're going to keep it as a number, but I'm going to show you how we turn that into a percentage. And the rest of them are single line of text, so we can hit next. And you're going to give it a name. And of course, you can give it a description, color, icon. Have fun with all that customization there. All right, and as you notice, it shows up as another tab up here, and everything is imported. And if we scroll down, you can see there's much more, many more rows than what was originally included. So we're going to scroll over because one thing I want to adjust quickly, and as you can see, it adds the dollar amount for currency, is my tab for expected profit margin kind of just shows these numbers, and I want to show them percentages. So go to edit, I believe, and we're going to hit show as percentage. That will flip those into percentages. Makes it a little easier to see. All right. And we've got a couple columns. As you can see, I've got some yes, no's in here. One of the things that I want to go into potentially in the next section or the next session that we do is you can actually do filters, and you can do web parts that show those filters for only those columns. So I can have a link to the master project list that only shows me projects that have been completed or projects that have a survey score. You do have some filter options up here where you can actually adjust some of that stuff, but you do have the ability to just make this an entirely new list to be able to give you all sorts of new and interesting data. Another thing that I really enjoy about lists, and I'm going to do this on the currency tab here, is totals. So if you go down to totals, you can actually do various things like sum. And as you can see, it opens up this area down here, which is scrollable. It stays there at the bottom. You can see the sum, you can see the average, minimum, maximum. You can do a lot of work there to see what all that is. And of course, you can sort by small to larger, larger, smaller, filter by. You've got a lot of different options there. All right, so we talked about attachments and permissions. So as mentioned, anybody who has permissions to this site will have permissions to this list. But what if you want to give someone access to just one area? Like if we click on just this row, it'll actually open up and kind of give you some good information here. But if you don't want them to see everything, you actually have the ability to just give a person access to just a single row. So you can go under Manage Access, and you can click plus. We're not going to add anybody at the moment, but you can give anybody access to just see that row. So they don't have to see the entire list if you don't want them to. And you can also, of course, stop sharing the list and any other options that you're used to seeing in Microsoft 365. One of the neat things about doing that as well is the copy link feature. So you can copy that link, send it to them. And they'll be able to see just that row. They won't be able to see anything else in that particular list. They can go to just that and actually get whatever they need out of that particular row. So there's a lot of really neat functionality that you can break this apart and really do a lot of cool stuff with just the rows in itself. Let's see, you can also delete the row. You don't have to delete the entire list. As you can notice, that one has gone away. And attachments. So we talked about putting in attachments to this list. So you can do it from a couple different spots. We can go to details, scroll down, and let's just say we got a survey from this. I've got a survey template here, but we'll just pretend that that is the survey that was given for this particular project. Now that it is included in there, you can access it. Now, the one thing that I find interesting is you don't automatically see that there is an attachment to that. You have to really click into it, see it, and once you click into it, you can pull it up. And I didn't populate this with anything really, but you can see that it pulls up that document there. So one of the things that I like to do is add a custom column. Show hide columns. One of them is called attachments. Apply that. And you can see the little paperclip icon that says there is an attachment here. So you're able to go and see that. And as you notice, there was a lot of other different columns that you can add in there to be able to do all sorts of things to your individual rows. So you have a lot of flexibility, not only with the list itself, but with the rows inside the list. So.
Hey, Jeff, we do have a, I know that we oftentimes like to wait for questions at the end, but I feel like this question is probably going to be pertinent to what you're covering right now. So are you okay if I open it up? We've got a question from Parker. Parker, go ahead and unmute yourself. You raised your hand and go and ask your question.
Yeah, just a quick question. When you deleted that record, does that deletion go into a recycle bin anywhere that can be recovered?
It does. So when we go over to SharePoint, because remember all this is stored in SharePoint, there is the recycle bin. And as you can see, there is that area that I can choose to restore. And if we come back here, refresh. I've done that several times, so I think I restored the right one. Did I refresh and the list went away? Nope, there it is. Took a second. Yep, there you go. As you can see that row has been restored. So you're going to get all the functionality from SharePoint. That's where you really need to do some of those kind of back-end processes for it. I'm not aware of a way to restore that list inside Teams at the moment, but going to the recycle bin for that site is easy enough to do it. And as you can see, I've deleted and re-added and done all sorts of stuff like that in the past year. So yeah, great question. All right, so speaking of SharePoint, it is a great time to kind of go over to SharePoint and take a look at the site. So you've got your list available in Teams, but the team site as well. In SharePoint, you might want users to have access to that list. As you can see, you don't readily see it in here. Now, default activity will show you that stuff has been put into there. But in order to see the list, you want to actually add it as a web part. So on the right-hand side, we're going to edit. We're going to find an area, find a section that we can use, type list. There you go. It automatically notes, because it's pulled it from site contents, that there is a master project list. Click there. Quickly just republish. So you can add that as a web part there as well. And one of the things that also that you'll note is that the list actually doesn't show up on the left-hand side. One of the nice thing about Documents Library and Documents, they'll actually show on the left-hand side, but lists don't by default. So what you can actually do is you can go into the site contents. We're going to go into the list. It's kind of buried a little deep. List name, description, and navigation. You can click it on for the quick launch. I personally like the quick launch on the left-hand side. I think it's nice to have that set up and stuff that I can drive to quickly. So now you can see that the master project list shows up on the left-hand side. And when you click into it, it'll go right into that list that you have built. And one of the things that I also want to make mention here, and I didn't do it in Teams because I think it's easier to show in SharePoint, is the quick edit feature. So you can click into each row and click edit and pull it up and do some of this, but you also have the ability to do quick edits as well. So if we uncheck that, we can click quick edit. And as you can see, it puts a box there to where I can quickly change names, do whatever I need to do, and actually work with the list instead of having to go into each row. And then once you're done, you just hit exit quick edit, and you've got those changes made. So, all right. And the last thing that I want to show in this demo is the ability to just create a new list from scratch. We've done a lot with creating lists from Excel and how to manipulate that data. But creating a list from scratch, of course, in Teams, you have that one area that we can go back to here in a bit. But under SharePoint, you have new, you have list, give it a name. You can give it a description. This is a nice button, show in site navigation. That will actually allow it to show on the left-hand side. So if you uncheck that, it won't be there, and you'll have to go into that kind of deep area that I went into to make it show up. Or you can just keep it checked, and it'll actually show up there. And then as you can see, it is pretty blank here. So you can just hit new to hit row, but I'm actually going to do quick edits. 1, 2, oops, 3, and so on and so on. You can hit plus, you can do text, you type whatever you want, and you can actually just start to build the list out from scratch here. And that's why I kind of say the templates, if you can find a template that's kind of got some of this stuff built for you, it might work a little better. But if you're wanting to build from scratch, you have that option as well. All right. So that is the demo. We're going to go on back.
Hey, Jeff, before you go back, there was a question that was asked, and I wanted to wait until you finish through some of your doing there. But Joseph Dunn asked the question of, is there a way to easily manage access by metadata? So, for instance, could you have one of the columns potentially be like organization A, and then you permission it so that only people that are in the organization A group have access to that data? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see what options we have here, because I know we can do it by rows, but columns. Not seeing much helpful. There might be stuff that's built into the actual site itself when you go into list settings. There's permissions for this list, but I think it's more an overview as to what's available. So it's a great question. I could do some research and get back to you on that one. I'm not sure if that's.
Yeah, I know the old school way would have been SharePoint Designer using workflow, that sort of thing, which is fine. And I'm sure, and I know Power Automate Flow does it, but it would, if you could do item permissioning right there by manage access. I was like, that's awesome. And I actually have a project this week that is like, I need to do metadata permissioning. Oh my God, would this do it? But I guess I'll just have to use a flow. But that's no, that's cool though.
Well, I mentioned it a little earlier. The one thing that makes me most excited about lists is, since Microsoft has kind of taken it from just being a content piece of SharePoint to its own standalone app, that allows the community to give feedback and the developers to build new features into it. And so I would, recommend, the user voice portal. If you suggest that in there and it gets enough of those upvotes, they'll start building it in there. That seems like a pretty useful thing to have. So I would expect that Microsoft would actually start building something like that soon. So.
Yeah, especially since it's going to make it its own standalone app now, and they're really putting a lot of focus on the list. We've seen it a lot in the forums and the weekly updates or daily updates sometimes you get. But yeah, the user voices also. If you haven't done that before, we'd strongly recommend that, because you can post feature suggestions and vote for ones that you like, and the more votes, they'll prioritize that on the roadmap oftentimes.
Yeah.
Yes,
I like that.
That portal is great.
Oh,
yeah,
good. Great.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. Really, it's really about basics today. Just wanted to get you guys introduced to Microsoft Lists and the new features that are coming just this month. I was telling Nate earlier that I kept, as I was building content throughout the week, I kept looking every morning to see, is the list app there yet? Is it there? Should we bring it into it? Not yet, but I'll bet you as soon as we're done here, it'll show up tomorrow. So really excited for that. Very quick overview on how to build and modify those lists in SharePoint and Teams. And again, a second part to this, I think, is going to be, once that list app comes into play, how to build in there. And they are making a mobile version as well, which I think is going to be super handy and convenient. So you can have all those available on your iOS or Android device. Importing lists from Excel, personally, I think that's one of my favorite features as well, because we have a lot of lists already in Excel, and to just kind of bring those in and share those out is going to be pretty powerful. And then hopefully the differences between lists and libraries and ToDo and when to use which one. Hopefully you guys have taken something from all of that and ready for questions. Our next power user session, we do know it's in October. We don't have the date saved just yet, but keep track of over at mytech.com/events. And we'll have that posted soon, and we'll see. It might be the second session to this. This is fun. I love lists.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And the only other thing I'll add to that is that we're building out a dedicated landing page on our site specifically for these sessions. So we'll communicate with this group, anyone who's registered or attended a session, about that, and that'll have specifically the links to the recordings for these sessions, so you'll be able to reference those easily, as well as any of the future events. So because right now they're kind of getting commingled in with all of our other events, which is okay. They'll be there too. It's just that because we're really trying to target folks like yourselves that are going to be the power users in the organizations, we wanted to have a special space for that makes it a little easier for you. So we'll be building that out, and stay tuned for that as well. So we'll send that information out once it's ready. Well, and with that said, Jeff, so questions, folks. I know we've got a couple that we've interjected already, but please go ahead and raise your hand, and then we'll see if things that Jeff can show you. And if we don't know the answer, we'll put it on the parking board and see if we can get back to you. Looks like we're getting somebody typing. So you can either type it in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand. So it looks like we've got Parker that raised your hand. So Parker, go ahead, unmute, and please ask your question.
Sorry, I can't find the chat functionality on my side. This is probably a later session, but I'm really looking forward to greater integrations between different lists. You had a list of, one of your columns was clients, and I'm picturing something where, those clients are clickable to another list, and it's all the information about that client. And I know there's a little bit of that in lists right now, but it's never been what I want it to be. Have you seen any tease or anticipate a lot of development in that front?
I do. In fact, I should have saved the link. There is a link to Microsoft's roadmap, and one of the in developments that they just started about is that integration. Sounds almost identical to what you speak of. So I do think that is coming. I would hope, based on how much they're building, how this roadmap is going, that I would see something like that before the end of the year. So yeah, that's a very, very powerful feature that Microsoft was pretty adamant about making sure that they included that.
And Jeff, we can send that if you have that link. We'll send that in the follow-up email. So get that to Stephanie. We'll send that out to everybody.
Yep, absolutely.
Thanks for the question. Anybody else? Well, the only thing I'll add a little comment that one of the things that I've noted with lists, as far as depending on how people are using lists and or Planner, like you mentioned ToDo, Jeff, but the Planner app is one of the challenges that we had initially between lists versus Planner, is that we were using Planner tasks as a place to capture list type stuff. And the problem with that we found is that it then became it looked like it was an action item, because that's the intent of Planner, is that this is an action or a to-do or a task to complete, and which should have a person and a due date associated with it. And we were using it initially as a parking board for just stuff we wanted to talk about or things that we wanted to consider or future roadmap items. But it once we started using Planner for what its intended purpose was, which is to create visibility around actions and to-dos, then it got muddled and commingled with these things that were not action items yet. They were intentionally not actions. So that was one of the key things that we found, even in our meetings when we're doing department meetings, is that instead of using the Planner app, Lists is one of those great places for a department meeting or cross-functional group when you have a parking board or you're just trying to create a discussion list. Keep track of a lot of those variables is a great place to use Lists versus something like Planner, which is intended for a group setting. But again, that's like To-Do. To-Do is supposed to be an action or a to-do. Planner is supposed to be an action or to-do that has team visibility or group visibility, whereas a list can be just more of a parking board or some of the stuff that Jeff illustrated. So those are a couple other things that we've found when we've talked to a lot of different clients and people about, again, Planner, Lists, document libraries, To-Do, all these different variables, is really trying to understand the subtle different idiosyncrasies of how they're designed to work together, which might help you choose one versus the other depending on your goal and your intent. So that was just a tidbit that you made me think of, Jeff, when you called out the To-Do app again.
Yep.
So, well, I don't know if that made anyone think of other questions or thoughts, but if not, we can give time back in your day. But also I'll pause. I'll have one more awkward pause to see if anybody's got any questions. That wasn't our screen freezing. That was the awkward pause. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay tuned for, like I said, that power user landing page, and as well as the future sessions that'll be coming. We'll schedule it probably in early to mid-October. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have an excellent day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Jeff.